This is Jeff Davis with the Alignment Podcast, where we explore sales and marketing alignment strategy for B2B businesses. Make sure to visit jeffdavis2.com for all things alignment. Now let's talk about how to create togetherness.
Today's guest is Paul Bickford, Global Director of Sales and Channel Enablement at Oracle, as well as President of Transformative Sales Solutions. Paul has trained and coached over 12,000 professionals all over the world and continues to consult with sales leaders and CEOs on sales solutions that create transformation and lead to results. In our conversation, we discuss who should be in charge of an alignment effort, how to address a company culture that doesn't support alignment between sales and marketing, and how training can be leveraged to increase empathy between sales and marketing. With that said, let's jump into the episode.
Paul, thank you for joining the podcast today.
Hey, thank you for having me, Jeff. I really appreciate being on.
Absolutely. I'm glad you're going to help us understand the sales and marketing alignment thing from a training and change management standpoint. So for those that are not familiar with your work and what you do, why don't we go ahead and start the conversation with telling us who Paul Bickford is?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I have very active in the Sales Enablement Society. I'm the Denver chapter president. I am a chapter officer in the American Association of Inside Sales Professionals, and I work globally with sales organizations to transform their results as far as increasing revenues, win rates, and reducing sales cycles, and work with companies from startups all the way up to Fortune 100 organizations, and something I'm very passionate about, and glad to be a part of the movement as sales enablement is, evolving today.
So I think you, because of your roles in the past, have probably had a very unique perspective on what is going on in B2B today, just with trying to obtain sustainable growth and that sort of thing. Give me a little bit of taste of your perspective on what sales and marketing alignment means to you.
Well, it's something that, always garners a lot of conversation. I think it's making sure that each is being held accountable for that open channel communication, and realizing that instead of being siloed, realizing that both are really moving in the same direction. And so I think for marketing, it's about a transparency with what's going on, and a good communication channels with sales about the campaigns they're putting together and what the outputs are and how they're sourcing information to help sales, and as well as providing the tools necessary that can be used in a meaningful way with the sales force to drive revenue. And then for sales, the responsibility, I think, is to work those campaigns in earnest, give feedback, and try to be, good corporate citizens as well. Because I think part of it, and I get it. I mean, I have a sales, DNA at the deepest levels, but sometimes I think, and justifiably so, Jeff, that it's like, hey, marketing, you work for sales. What you do should drive sales, and you're kind of accountable to us. And we when we sell things, that's where we justify you and et cetera. But it really is a partnership. And I think and so on the sales side, we have to be gracious and make sure we're able to communicate. And I think marketing should appreciate how important sales is, to what they do. But I'll share with you a brief cartoon that comes to mind that I posted on LinkedIn. I guess it's been about a year ago, and it was marketing people in a boardroom, and the person was really excited and said, "Hey, we've just gotten our recent statistics back, and we showed that we've had 10% more higher clicks on the email campaign we sent out, and we've got this much more traction from this marketing effort." And we've really blown out our expectations on what we thought we would generate as far as interest with these marketing efforts, and we're really pleased. And then the caption, it shoots to the CEO and says, "Well, did any of this drive any new sales?" And then she says, "Oh, I have no idea." And so, right? And so it's like, well, we need to be able to measure that. We need to be able to look into that, and then being able to say, if we did, why, and why were things effective? If we didn't, what was that about? And so, there's one organization I'm aware of where, the campaigns were challenging based on the codes and the way the information was put in. And so the sales group had to do a lot of scrubbing with campaigns to do that, to, get the data right, which kept them off away from, customer facing activities trying to sell. And so there was just, some animosity. And I think it was, in some cases, some parties saying, well, not it. And, you touch your nose and you go, not it. And trying to, instead of saying, who didn't do it, say, what do we need to do to fix it? What do we need to do to drive it? And it did get there, to the credit of all involved, but it was a real source of, I think, just human nature kicking in, and that, that fear of not wanting to look bad or like on either side, you're not performing. And, and I think there's got to be some approachability. There's got to be some transparency. And I think that's cultural, and that's got to be across the whole organization. And I think it's the Peter Drucker quote that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And the scary thing to me as a sales enablement professional, I think any individual in a company, is you can't change culture. So if it's not there, it's not something that you can just say, okay, I need to work on that. It's a group effort, and it takes a long time. And so, you want to try to at least drive, I'll call subcultural change or alignment, and being able to say, you know what, this didn't go the way we thought, or you know what, we missed this, or you know what, this should have been different. And hey, sorry that happened. What can we do to kind of get there, versus, well, this happened because of this or that. And I'm not saying this situation I just shared, Jeff, necessarily went there. I'm speaking more in generalities at this point. And I think it's just saying, hey, we're all going to make mistakes, but let's try to figure out what we're doing. Let's try to find ways to measure what we're doing before we even do it. And then let's check in and see how things are progressing as we understand who is supposed to do what when. So there's accountability and realistic expectations across both groups.
Yeah, but you hit on something that I think might give people a visceral reaction. You said the word culture. What if you identify that you are in an organization, and I guarantee you, I know this happens, where culture really is the biggest impediment to aligning sales and marketing? How do you address that?
Well, it's a good question. And I tell you, there's some basic things around change management that come to mind for anything where you want to change it. And as a boss I had used to say this out of context a lot because it fit, in the business world, but he said, hey, the first step is admitting you have a problem. And so can we get the people, the various, that own the various P&Ls and own the various segments of the business to realize and say, hey, this is an issue. And if I had to guess, because I haven't looked, but just being candid and I guess transparent myself, I'm sure there are things that you could scare up online or work with consultancies to find out ways to do an oil stick check on your culture. And there are lots of things that you can look at as far as, metrics where culture, is not good, as far as whether it's attrition, employee engagement, other such elements. But first realizing all those that would make the decision, all those at the highest levels to agree, hey, this is a challenge, this is an issue. And I think with any conversation in business with, kind of an ROI, and I think there are some employee engagement things out there that could probably dovetail into a case and say, this is worth addressing, here's why, and here's what, we should do about it. And then it's just a matter of, is it a massive overhaul? Because there are organizational development companies that, work with companies on things like that. And then there are things that you can do internally, right? Because there's a culture of a company, there are cultures of individual teams, there are cultures and geographies, and there's a lot of interplay in that. But you don't want to get caught up in paralysis by analysis. But I think it starts with having the conversation and showing how it's hurting the business results, and how, if it's changed, like anything, how it can impact those and work better for the group at large. But it is definitely no easy task. I definitely don't want to be flippant about that. I mean, that is a major,
it's a massive change. But what you say, I think, supports a lot of the conversations I've had, because, we've had guests on and other that I've talked with ask the question, who should be in charge of an alignment effort? Is it sales? Is it marketing? VP of sales? Is it CMO? And, more often than not, and I think that I agree, it has to be the CEO. And so kind of what you talked about this cultural change and the interplay and the fact that it's no easy feat. If we don't have that executive level support for an effort like this, I just don't think the VP of sales and the CMO are enough in order to really change the organization in the way that we need to.
No, it's a great point. In fact, I'll share. There's somebody I've gotten to know in the Sales Enablement Society named Jen Marie Jacober. She might be a great person to maybe have on your podcast, but she is in the Sales Enablement Society, and she and I were talking at the Sales 3.0 conference in Philly. And I said, tell me more about what you do. I know you have your own business. And she's, she goes, actually, I'd work with sales enablement. She goes, but really, I work with businesses. My whole business is around helping companies with change management. And I was talking to somebody that knows she and I mutually, who said, oh yeah, no, she works with like very, very high profile household name organizations. Like she's very, very drilled in with what she does. And so that gave me even more esteem for her credibility with business. But she and I were talking about some things like that. And I think because in sales enablement, I was just having a conversation with someone about this 2 days ago, how it all needs to be about a change management plan as we're looking to drive, new ideas, new skills, new behaviors, and then a consistency that creates change for an ROI with measurable results. And all of that has to be a change management plan with a communication plan. And I think the last thing I'll say in this point is when it comes to ham and eggs, the chicken's involved, but the pig is committed. Does everybody have skin in the game? Right? Because you and I both know, Jeff, success has 1,000 parents and failure's an orphan, right? Something goes well, everybody, well, this was my idea. Well, I contributed this and everybody, but if it fails, it's again, your finger, it's not it. Well, I knew this wasn't a good idea. Or, well, I was worried, but I don't want to say anything. Cause so, and so if we all are aligned up front, everybody has skin in the game. We're very clear on who needs to do what, when, with touch points and feedback loops. Right? All of these things are change management opportunities. And frankly, you could argue, Jeff, just good business. But, and that's got to go for the people at the top of the food chain too. And I'm reminded of a company I worked for, great company, but there was a product. This was when I was in wholesale distribution for a number of years. And there was a product type that was very, very profitable that some branches in one of the regions had been selling for several years. And they said, hey, we need to start selling this in all the branches across the country. So they reached out to the senior leaders and said, hey, this is the business case. These are the margins. Do you support us doing this? Do you support your leaders down the food chain, selling this, in their respective markets? And they all said yes. And it wasn't happening. And after however long the period of time was, they had to get them back on the phone and say, you guys said you would support. And they said, well, yeah, we said we would. And they said, okay, well, support means you're going to free up space in your warehouse. You've got to find out what stuff are you not going to carry and how that can impact your customers to have this kind of product in stock. You have to hire an owner of that business with subject matter expertise in that business at every single one of your branches. You have to spend money on marketing and going out and courting the customers and the customer types who purchase this product. You know what I mean? And so again, I think it's being the chicken or the pig. It's like, oh, that's what support means. And they go, oh, okay. So then they had to figure out, right, where are we going to, where's the money going to come from? How are we going to help our leaders or direct them as far as how they need to align their budgets to be able to execute? And I use that sometimes as an example of what support really means. And I think we have to make sure that we get that and give that guidance and make sure there's an understanding of that, even at the very top, because a lot of times in sales enablement, you're influencing without authority. Right? I mean, we're influencing leaders that don't report to us that are usually a few pegs up the food chain. And, so we've got to get the person that is in charge of them to understand and agree and buy into what we're trying to accomplish, because ultimately it helps all of our goals, right? But we've got to sell it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I want your perspective also, too, when I look at the relationship between sales and marketing, and I spent time in both, I think one of the breakdowns for this relationship is that salespeople don't understand what marketers do, and marketers don't really truly understand what salespeople do. So with that said, I believe if we take the time to create more empathy between both of these groups to understand how truly what they do impacts the other, I think that will help us to start to having them want to collaborate together. I'm curious from your perspective, how can training and coaching be leveraged in order to raise awareness and create that empathy between the two?
Well, I think, there was somebody I was talking to just a couple of weeks ago who was telling me that at their organization, that product managers, product marketing people, they're part of their onboarding or whatever is they have to spend time initially with a salesperson in just a day in the life and spending time with them in the field or in talking to customers and really see how that's going. And they started doing that to address just such a gap. And they said, it was visceral watching the light bulb come on for these guys going, oh man, I've been working in product marketing for years and I've never been exposed to that. And I thought I got it, but now I really get it. And I think that, another piece of that is there's probably something to be said for maybe giving, the salespeople a chance to understand and see a day in the life and see what goes on and what happens there. Because I'll tell you, one of the challenges that I see when I'm working with a group, I spend most of my time around methodology and, for salespeople and then for leadership and coaching training for the management group. But there's always that product knowledge piece. It's very important. But what happens is you get solutions engineers and product managers or product marketers, whatever, to come in to teach the salespeople. And it's completely incongruent because they traditionally talk about, general information, or solutions engineer, God bless them. They talk about all the different functionalities and the different fields and the software and the different tabs and and it's like drinking from a fire hose for the salespeople. Plus, it's not information they need to sell. So,
too much.
I put together a template to say, I learned to say, okay, here's what it is. Give me an elevator pitch. Give me how to qualify customers. Give me industry trends and impacts. Give me business challenges per persona, right? Per job title for the companies we call on. How to overcome objections, competitive differentiators for the top 3 to 5 competitors in the space, and whatever. And what I've found is when they wouldn't do it, I would get frustrated. And what I'd learned is, they don't have that background. They don't know. And you don't want to shame anybody. You want to be the egg on their face. So it's like, again, if there was some syncing, not only would they be able to help better with that ask when they were asked to contribute, but just with their day-to-day job, right, they'd be more impactful. And so helping to bridge that gap and say, hey, it's okay if you don't have it. I'm just telling you what we need. And so let's go get it. And if we need help, again, going back to culture, right? Is there a transparency? Can you say, I don't know, without a culture of where you have egg on your face? Or the one company I worked with, they used to joke about, oh, he just pulled a CLM, which stood for career limiting move, or CEM, which is career ending move. And it was very tongue in cheek, but, there were things that happened for sure. And so I just, again, and it may sound Pollyanna, Jeff, but I think there are good companies where it is that way. There are good companies where you can do that, where you can say that, where you have that, where it's a guy I worked with very recently used to say, fail, but fail fast. Like, it's okay to fail, but fail fast, learn from it so we can keep moving forward. And I think that's a great way one way, to put that so that everybody can continue to progress.
Yeah. So my last question for you with our time together today, I know you do a lot of work about sustainable change. So when folks, either have coaching or training, they go to learn new things and do things differently. How do we sustain the new knowledge that they achieved in that meeting? Help us understand, very broad level, what are some of the things that leaders need to do as potentially you're taking on alignment effort in the organization to ensure that it keeps its steam and people actually over time are changing behaviors to work together better?
Well, sure. So I think the first thing is to figure out, I always call it the bookends, figuring out before you engage in an initiative, how are we going to measure it? What are we trying to change on the business front? What do we need people doing and saying consistently to create that change, that measurable business, those metrics? And then, so what do we need them to learn to be able to do those things, to be able to hit those numbers? And then if they already know how to do it, it's how do we reinforce it? And so that's where, creating training where people can practice the skills in the training environment. And also what I do is do a certification. So they prove by taking a test that they know it, and then they have to practice it if it's a methodology to prove they can do it. And then the managers, the coaching programs, I always say the coaching is the secret sauce. The managers to coach, to be taught how to coach, to have a cadence for coaching built into a true performance management framework, and understanding that deal coaching is not the same as skills coaching. It's not about just talking about what deals are in the pipeline and what's needed to close and what's in the quarter, but professional skills development coaching and making sure that managers are spending time with their salespeople, watching them sell, sitting on calls, listening to them sell and giving them feedback, and understanding that the difference between supportive coaching, which is, hey, how'd you think that went? And why do you say that? And would you've done anything different here, versus directive coaching, which is, hey, when they did that, you should have said this. And when they said this, we should have went here. Any questions? Great. Ready, break. And then, right? and then having coaching tools to get outputs and visibility into how the coaching's going. And is it working? And are people coachable? And do we need to, managers need help with how they're coaching? And then the people above them, the more senior sales leaders, coaching the managers and spending time with them and helping them understand that that's not granular and that's equally as important. And, peer mentoring. I mean, there's a great tool right now that I like called Just Sold It, where it's just something on people's phones where salespeople can reach out to somebody who recently closed a deal, and they type in like what kind of company, what industry, what size of company, and they can pull up whoever's recently closed a similar deal and just hit them up and say, "What'd you do? What'd you avoid? What'd you and just informal ways to just chat." And I think we've got to set up ways to help this be cultural, so people are coaching each other, people are contributing to each other's success.
Yeah, no, I like that. I could talk about this all day, but we are short of time. But Paul, I want to thank you for helping our listeners to think differently about sales and coaching. I think specifically what I really got out about this is the importance of coaching across the whole organization, not just coaching, reps and frontline folks, but coaching managers and leaders so that we can all do this better. So thank you for your time today.
Hey, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the episode. Don't forget to visit me at jeffdavis2.com and follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Davis2. Did today's conversation resonate with you? Then share with your colleagues to help the Alignment Podcast grow. Join us for the next episode where we continue to talk about how to create togetherness.